Welcome to this episode of
The Red Flag Coaches.
I'm Dr. T.
And I'm Lawrence Knighton, the other half.
And today we're going to be talking about boundaries and breakthroughs, how to spot red flags and take charge of your relationship.
Take charge.
Can you do that? Can you take charge of your relationship? I hope that after this episode, you will feel empowered to be able to take charge of your relationship and see how you're showing up and maybe make a change.
That's it. Let's get it started.
Let's get it started. So here we are. So today, I want us to really dive deep. We gonna go deep. The first episode, y'all had to get used to us. This episode, listen, we got on our boots today. We are ready to go deep today. Why do we need to set boundaries? See, some of y'all lack boundaries.
Right. Sure.
Some of y'all don't know how to put up boundaries. But after today, you are going to recognize, number one, why boundaries are important, and number two, how to put them up, because we all need appropriate boundaries.
Everybody needs appropriate boundaries.
And then we're going to talk about how to take charge of relationships. Stop being a victim in your own relationship. Stop, walking through the tulips and being lazy about your relationship. Exactly. After today, we want you to be able to take charge of that. So let's get started. I want to go back to the basics. I know you have watched episode 1. Nod your head with me. You have watched episode 1, but I want to go back and I want to revisit what are red flags. So here's the big brother that you wish you had when you started dating.
Yes.
Right? We all wish we had a big brother to break everything down for us, but here is the big brother you wish you had when you were dating. So Lawrence, break down, what is a red flag?
Well, simply put, a red flag is anything that will cause you to be hurt in the long run.
Right.
A red flag is anything that you overlook that you know is a potential sign that can be devastating to your relationship, such as sometimes we overlook people who talk disrespectfully to us. And we act as if it's nothing big, but that ends up coming back to haunt us. So a red flag is really anything that could hinder your progress in a relationship.
Yeah, so giving them some examples of what red flags are is that inconsistent behavior in the relationship.
Exactly.
It's that lack of communication, right?
It's that emotional unavailability.
That was my favorite, because a lot of times we'll get in those relationships and we're looking for people that we can connect with only to discover they're emotionally unavailable to us.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that we have not talked about is the trauma bonding, and we'll probably get with that a little later.
Oh, that's a whole nother episode in and of itself.
Another thing in itself.
Yeah. So trauma bonding is a good one. And so those are some of the red flags that when you're getting into relationships, you need to kind of take a look at and go, wait a minute, does this person have consistent behavior?
Right.
Is it easy for me to flow and have a conversation with them?
Yes, really. That's it's critical.
If I can't talk to you, listen, how are we going to build this relationship together?
And I think that's what a lot of people overlook initially is the communication, because to me, if you don't have communication, you really don't have anything.
Right. And so why are red flags so important? Some of the impact or an impact of having red flags and ignoring those red flags is when you don't address the red flags early on, they become flags on fire.
Exactly.
Let me just say that again. When you don't address the red flags early on, they become flags on fire. And what ends up happening is the trust in the relationship gets eroded by the very red flag that you choose to ignore.
It never fails. And that's why I always tell people, generally the main thing that you overlook will be the main thing that comes back to bite you.
Yeah. And oftentimes, we talked about this in episode 1, how women, we will overlook a red flag and believe that we can make a man.
And that's something you don't ever want to convince yourself that you can do, because it will not work.
Yeah. I told you in that first episode, we're looking for our happily ever after, and doggone it, we're going to do everything we need to do to get to that happily ever after.
Exactly.
We're going to kiss a pig, kiss a frog, do whatever we got to do, but we're looking for that happily ever after. And oftentimes that includes us ignoring the very important red flags.
Exactly.
So when we talk about boundaries, y'all go and take a breath, because here we go. Because I know it's about to get tight up in here. So I'm going to go ahead and let you come. Let's do it together.
Breathe. Sigh.
Okay, y'all ready? So let's talk about boundaries. We all need boundaries. Boundaries are important. It's necessary to have boundaries, not only in relationships, but you need to have boundaries personally before you even get into your relationship. So, what is a boundary?
Deal with it.
You want me to deal with that
Deal
one?
with it.
So I got a great illustration of what a boundary really is. And so I want you to always think about boundaries this way. When you're driving down the road, you see the sign that says, do not trespass. They
Right.
got a rope, they got a chain, they got something that keeps you from coming onto their property. So they've given you an explanation, an example of what where the boundary
Right,
starts,
right.
where their property actually starts. Not only do they have that chain or that rope or that gate or whatever, they also have a sign out front. And the sign that's attached to the gate, to the fence, to the rope says, do not trespass. That's number one. Number two, the sign will also say violators will be what? Prosecuted. So not only have they given you the example of where their property starts, not only have they told you don't come on my property,
right.
but they've also told you that when you choose to make the decision to come in this place that's not even yours, that I've told you I don't want you here, what ends up happening? They're going to prosecute you.
Exactly.
They've given you the consequence of choosing the wrong choice. I want you to think about boundaries, your boundaries, the same way.
And it really just guidelines and limits to how you set the standard for your relationship. Because if you don't set any boundaries initially, what's going to end up happening is they're going to walk all over you. They're going to violate you. They're going to do some things because you never set the standard. You never set the limit as to what that boundary looks like.
And that's what boundaries really are.
Right.
Boundaries are standards. They're the bare minimum
Right.
limit of what you're willing to tolerate. What is your boundary when it comes to your emotional health? What's your boundary when it comes to your mental health?
Exactly.
See, when we think of boundaries, we need to think emotions, we need to think mental, we need to think physical. But in this day and age, we also got to think digital. What are our digital boundaries?
That's it.
Right? Because some of y'all got boyfriends. I know none of y'all that are watching, right? Some of y'all got significant others who still stalking y'all on social media. That's a boundary violation.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Some of y'all still got people who are DMing you because you hadn't set your own boundary to block them. Come on now. I told you it was going to get a little tight. Let's just be honest. Boundaries are your bare minimums and your limits of what you're willing to accept.
Right. That's it. And that's what people have to realize, that you have to set boundaries in order to have a relationship that's going to be beneficial to not just you, but to the person that you're in a relationship with. Because if you don't have boundaries set, it's going to be disastrous.
Yeah. And you got to be clear. I know y'all probably asking, well, Tracy and Lawrence, I know my boundaries, but how do I set my boundaries?
Right.
You know, just like we talked about, there's a sign out front when a person sets their boundaries. That sign says what? Do not trespass. It's crystal clear. You don't have to wonder what that sign says. It's crystal clear. You got to be clear, and you've also got to be specific.
Yes.
Not Pacific. You've got to be specific about your boundary.
Exactly.
So when we talk about, well, you know what? After 11 o'clock, I don't answer my phone. That's a boundary.
Right.
That's a boundary. But when they slide and you a text, what you doing, and you answer your phone at 3 o'clock in the morning, guess who just violated that boundary?
Exactly.
You did. You violated your own boundary by responding. So your boundaries have to be clear. They got to be specific, but you also have to use I statements. Why is it necessary for people to use I statements when they are setting their boundaries?
Well, using I statements really just allows the person to hear exactly what you're saying. I don't expect you to do X, Y, Z. You have to use those I statements so that people are completely clear on what it is that you're expressing. That's the whole gist of all of that. If I'm saying I statements, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Right.
I need
And
you to
I'm
hear
taking
me.
charge of what
Right.
I expect. I'm taking charge of it. I'm responsible. Who's responsible for boundaries?
We are. responsible for my own.
That's it. That's it. Not only are you responsible for your boundaries, you're responsible for setting them,
Right.
but you're also responsible for enforcing them.
You got to.
See, I tell my clients when I'm doing sessions with the ladies, I don't know if you tell the guys this, because guys usually don't have boundaries like that, do they?
Yeah, they said something. Sometimes they do.
Yeah.
Not all the time,
I was about to say, do they really
Not
have
all the
boundaries
time.
like ladies do?
No.
But I often tell the ladies when I'm in the session with them, when it comes to their boundaries, they're in charge of setting them, they're in charge of enforcing them. And if they don't enforce them with consistency, guess what happens?
Nothing happens.
Nothing happens. That boundary becomes a suggestion.
Right.
And you look like you don't know what you want when 1 minute is a boundary violation and the next minute it's okay.
Right, exactly. And that's the inconsistency is going to cause them not to have consistency with you.
Right. Because they don't know how to take you.
Exactly.
And so when you are communicating your boundaries, be clear, be specific, use I statements, and be consistent.
That's it.
You got to be consistent in what you say about
For
your
sure.
boundaries. Listen, don't play with it. Be honest. And listen, I'm from the South, and we're recording
I'm
this.
from the North.
Upstate New York. They don't have this issue in upstate New York, but here in the South, you rarely see people take down a gate or a boundary that they've put up to say no trespassing.
Right.
Rarely do they take it down because people down here in the South, we believe in protecting our lands.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So when it comes to your own boundaries, when it comes to your emotional boundary, your mental boundary, your physical boundary, your digital boundary, you've got to remember that when you put it up, you got to be ready to enforce it. You got to
Right.
be ready to protect it.
And if you don't, again, it's going to come back to haunt you.
It is.
Yeah, you can't put a boundary in place and not enforce it.
Right. It becomes one of them flags on fire that we talked
Exactly.
about. It's
Exactly.
one of those flags on fires. So let's talk about taking charge of your relationship, because
That's
setting
key.
boundaries is a part of taking charge of your relationship. Do you even know what you want in a relationship? Can we start there?
That's a great place to start because, again, when you ask the average person, especially a woman, well, I'll say both, men and women. When you ask them, tell me exactly what is it that you want in a relationship, most people have a hard time articulating what they really want in a relationship. One, because they may have grown up in a household where whatever they saw, they think that that's normal, when the truth of the matter, it may have been abnormal.
Right.
Another facet of that may be the simple fact that because they have been dealing in relationships that weren't beneficial in the past, they still don't know what to look for, what to ask for. So it makes it extremely difficult for them to have a healthy relationship when you can't articulate what it is that you're looking for in a relationship.
So what I hear you saying, Big Brother Lawrence, what I hear you saying is before I even get into a relationship with somebody else, I need to have a relationship with myself.
You have to. Because the thing about it is, when you think about relationships, you have to have some confidence in the self aspect, self-love, self-respect. All of those selves have to be self with you first.
Yes.
Because if you don't have self-love, you're going to try to go through life hoping you can find someone to make you feel a certain way about yourself. If you don't have self-respect, you're going to attract people who don't respect you.
Oh, come on now.
And so those are the type of things that you have. If you have low self-esteem, you're going to find people who are going to take advantage of the
Right.
fact that they can sense that you have low self-esteem.
Right.
So you have to make sure that you are in tune with you first before you can actually think about getting into a relationship with somebody else, because if you don't, I promise you it's going to come back to haunt you.
I like what you said, that we have to fall in love with self first.
No question.
All of the selves. And so that requires us to even evaluate ourselves.
For sure.
And some of us are afraid to spend time with ourselves. Why? Because we don't really know ourselves. But spending time with yourself helps you to learn yourself, so the better version of you shows up for you
Exactly.
first and then shows up in the relationship.
Exactly. For sure.
And like you were saying, because we're so busy looking for an external feeling, we fail to take advantage of how we feel internally
Right.
about ourselves. So I'm looking at you, expecting you to make me feel some type of way about myself. That's not how a relationship works.
Not at all.
Yeah, I got to feel good about me before I even enter into a relationship with you.
I wish more people understood that, because most people get into relationships and they're just not comfortable with who they are.
Yeah.
They're just not in love with who they are. And that's why they have a track record of relationships not working, because you're in something and you don't know what you're in it for because you don't know you.
Right.
That's critical.
Right. And then we're in this relationship and it goes back to now you violated me in some type of way. And that's because you didn't know you.
No
You
boundaries.
didn't have your boundaries in place.
Right.
And now because you don't have your boundaries in place, your relationship looks like trash.
Right,
And you
exactly.
feeling like trash.
Exactly.
And so now you end that relationship only to do what? Go back to a past one or go try to find a new one.
I think it would probably be best to sum that up in the words of Billy Preston. Will they go around in circles? Anyway.
Track one.
Yes, sir.
All right, good people. Here we go. Not only do you have to take charge of you when it comes to creating this relationship that you want, but you also got to evaluate if you're in a relationship, if you're in a marriage, you got to evaluate it often. And I'm not talking about evaluating the other person. I'm actually talking about you.
Right, exactly. And so when you think about it, right, because we all are in a state of consistent growing, at least we should be.
We should be.
Should be.
Let's preface that by saying we should be.
And when you're in a consistent state of growth, you always have to take a look at, because what ends up happening in a lot of relationships, people end up outgrowing each other, and then they're trying to figure out, well, why is this relationship seemingly seems a little different now? Well, if you got one person who's growing and the other person is not trying to grow,
Right.
you're gonna be at that place where you're gonna be like, wow, okay. So that's why it's so important to evaluate, to look at the relationship, to see, okay, how can we make this better, or where are we going wrong? And that's why it's so critical.
Yeah. So as we wrap up here, we hope, we sincerely hope that you take a step back in your relationship. Forget the relationship first. You take a step back and look at you. How am I showing up in this space? What is it that I want to get out of this relationship? Not that you're in it just for you, but here's what you've got to do. Put a mirror up to yourself and going, am I expecting somebody else to do something I should be doing for myself
yourself.
first? Yeah. And then when it comes to boundaries, what are the boundaries that I need to put in place? I've had people who were married who have been married for many, many years come to us. I can remember one couple distinctly. They had very long and robust conversations about what boundaries look like.
Right, for sure.
And after working with me and working with us, they were able to go back and put some boundaries in place.
For sure.
And as a result, their relationship actually got stronger. They rated themselves, because we always ask them, how would you
Yes.
rate yourself on that first session together? I think they rated themselves like what, a 2?
2, yes.
A 2. And by the time they finished their time with us,
But that was only like 3 sessions.
yeah, that was only after 3 sessions, and they were up to like what, an 8? An 8, an 8, y'all, an 8.
We don't play the radio.
And that's because, listen, we don't just talk about this stuff. We actually live it. We live it. We live it. We coach it.
How do you go from a 2 to an 8 in just 3 sessions?
Yeah.
What? You do it by giving applicable means, measures, homework for them to work on to help their relationship, marriage become better.
Yeah. And that's what we're all about
Set
here at the
boundaries.
Red Flags. We want to help improve relationships, marriages. We want to improve people so that they will enter into the relationship knowing who they are and what they want.
And the truth of the matter is, once you do that, once you get to that place of knowing self, loving self, then the relationships become a whole lot more healthier. You start flourishing in the relationship, and then you start singing like Joe. I'm in love, round and round I go, out of control.
That's
I'm
track
in
3. Is
love.
that track 3?
Anyway.
That's track 3. So here, listen, we thank you all for joining us for this episode of the Red Flag Coaches Podcast. Can I give you a hint about what we wanted to talk about in the next episode? Y'all ready? Make sure you share this. Share this. And if you're listening somewhere else, make sure you share it to somebody else who needs this. You may not need it, hint, hint, but you know somebody who needs to know about red flags. Here we go. Our next episode, emotional baggage. Ooh, Lord.
That's a knockout.
Lord have mercy.
That's gonna be an hour.
Okay, emotional baggage. Are you ignoring red flags because of your past? Ooh, y'all need to make sure you join us for
Don't miss that
episode 3. Emotional baggage. Are you ignoring red flags because of your past? All right, people, we will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate it, and we love y'all like a hog loves slop. Y'all take care.